Last week, the Minister of Labour, Mildred Oliphant, launched the 16th Commission for Employment Equity Annual Report and Public Register of all designated employers. The report reflects on the status of employment equity in South Africa and how the country has progressed in its workplace transformation. To discuss the issue further, we joined in the studio by Mohale Ralebitso. He is the CEO of the Black Business Council. Morning Live.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, the report shows the presentation of the white group at top management level at 68.9%, and with the African group 14.3% and colored 4.7%. And we were talking just off air now, saying that there's still a long way to go.
There is a very long way to go. And for a long time, there's been a debate on whether or not transformation should be incentivized. And obviously, most of us being positive about the prospects for normalizing our society, where leaning towards the bias is let's give business an incentive to transform. And in fact, people submit their own plans on the basis of which they're to be measured. But clearly something different is required. We can't continue to move at such a lethargic pace if we're going to normalize South African workplaces and ensure that we tap into all the potential that's resident within our society. So something definitely needs to be done.
What is that something that's
it's time for some stick, to be blunt. The incentives are there in terms of, there's people are rewarded in terms of their BBB scorecards for training people from designated category groups. What we see instead is that there's a greater emphasis on training white males ahead of all the other groups, and white males are not part of the designated groups which are meant to be uplifted.
But then whose responsibility is it to ensure that the situation is better? Is it that of the employers or that of the employees?
It's that of the employers. The employers run the workplace. The employees should take up training when it's made available so that companies are able to be compliant and for themselves to be able to improve their careers. But the ultimate responsibility sits with employers, and in particular the CEOs and executive committees of the businesses which we have operating within the South African economy.
Now, this report further states that top management level in the public sector specifically is mostly populated by black people, Africans to be more specific, while white people are mostly concentrated in the private sector. Private sector.
We need to see the same equation within the private sector. We can't have the white male group being overrepresented to the tune of 6 times over the level at which they ought to be represented in top management, and Indians closely at 3 times. That picture has to be balanced unless we're taking a view that some subgroups in our society are more skilled and capable than others, which is simply not true. That myth was debunked with the end of apartheid. We can't continue to sustain patterns of employment that speak to there still being a job reservation system.
Now, you've mentioned the BEE scorecards amongst other things. So I wanted to come to the issue of policy. We do have policies that are actually looking at the implementation of 50-50. Are they not sufficient enough, or efficient rather?
No, the policies are there. What we've been missing is proper enforcement, because there's a pattern. The BMF Transformation Monitor has spoken for a long time to the fact that we've hit a ceiling in terms of the level of representation of black people, and specifically the African subgroup within those statistics. So we've long known what the issue is. What's missing is the action on the part of employers to target the African and other subgroups and colored subgroups within the designated category employees to ensure that more training is done so that the pool of available talent grows. So if you follow the logic at present of what's happening, you have an overrepresentation of white males. There's a bias towards training white males. What does that give you? It gives you a wider pool of white males from which to choose next wave talent. And even when those white males do come out of certain systems, they re-enter either as consultants or in other corporations still as senior management, to the exclusion of the other subgroups. It's only the Indian subgroup of the black component, because black is black, African, Indian, colored, and now the resident small Chinese population, which is no more than 10,000 people.
Now, equal pay for work of equal value seems to be one of the challenges in the workforce. How can that be rectified?
Well, you have to smash the monopoly of the white male subgroup on power within the workplace, because if you choose people who are the same, who are they going to reward? They're going to reward people like themselves. So you have to deal with that dynamic of representation, and inside of that have a rigorous check on ensuring that there is equal work for equal pay, that there is no gender bias, which also means that you have to look at the representation of women within the workplace. And equally, those people who are from the designated groups have to do their part. They can't just be happy to be in the C-suite and to entrench their particular individual position. They have to be agitators for change, to say that we're not happy to be the only, we're not happy to be the often labeled exception, the first black to, the first woman to say that there must be more black people, broadly speaking, and there must be more women in those places.
And that's actually how they labeled, are they not? The
Of
first
course.
black CEO of this particular company.
And some people take particular pride in that. They pat themselves on the back and they don't do what they're meant to be doing, which is you wouldn't be there if there wasn't a framework in place that says that you should be given the opportunity. So don't kick off the ladder, put more ladders so that more people can climb. And we have to do our part in these corporate spaces as activists for change. And equally, government has to now strengthen its resolve for there to be the implementation of penalties. Part of the reason people aren't taking this seriously is because there are really no consequences.
But in terms of the disabled people, how far has the country done in integrating them in the workplace?
Overall, we've done poorly. There are a number of things that have been done to make workplaces more user-friendly from the standpoint of access. What's missing is the added impetus to ensure that the skills pool of differently abled people is at the levels necessary in order to be able to feed the expected participation. It's one of the areas of continued and sustained underperformance as far as representation is concerned.
Now, we do know that there are penalties involved if the employers are not abiding by the rules and regulations. What do you have to say about that? Are the penalties enough?
Well, let's start with the penalties that are there, which relate to a percentage of turnover being the fine. And thereafter, if that's failing to get people's attention, and remember, a percentage of turnover is going to be a significant proportion of profit, and business and business to make a profit. So if you're incurring a penalty at a turnover level, it'll almost certainly wipe out, in some instances, the profitability of those entities. So one would want to see those penalties being applied, and in time, if we need stronger stick, we should get on with that, with doing so, and not hesitate any further.
And those penalties are usually not implemented at the same time. Companies are usually given like 6 months to rectify whatever problems they have.
Absolutely. So let's put all of the companies that have failed to meet their mapped out progression over a period of time, give them the necessary notices, and when time comes after 6 months, whack them with the penalties. It's taken too long. We don't have another 400 years, which is roughly how long it took to get us to where we are. We don't have that long to wait. We can't have young black people getting qualified only to be disadvantaged in the workplace. We can't have women being qualified only to be marginalized so that the white male subgroup can maintain its yoke on power in our society and disadvantage our ability to compete globally.
Now, you're saying that lack of transformation in the workplace will continue to undermine the goal of growing the employment base, especially of the black people. But what do you think solutions are to the problem?
Well, again, we have a clear-cut thing that speaks to what should happen if people don't comply, which is the meting out of penalties. Let's start there. And that will almost certainly get some action, because the companies that are compliant will become more profitable because they'll have an advantage over the ones that are losing their profit to penalties. And if more is required, more should be done. I mean, we're all clear that it wasn't a willing process whereby we became a democracy. Some people wanted to resist that. We pushed on and we were able to get it inside of that process. We can't have the democracy being held hostage and patterns of the past continuing to be sustained.
So if nothing is being done, we might be able to see a 50-50 base by the year 2033. That's how far we can go.
That's too far away. We have to move a lot faster than that, and we cannot wait.
Well, Mildred Oliphant, that's where we're going to leave it, but thank you very much for your time.
A pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Mohale Ralebitso is the CEO of the Black Business Council. Morning Live takes a break. We continue after this.